Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. From the beginning, the history of humankind was never inevitable, and its trajectory has been shaped less by design than by a series of accidents, adaptations, and peculiar leaps of imagination. Around 13.5 billion years ago, matter, energy, time, and space burst into existence. About 4.5 billion years ago, Earth formed, and then some 3.8 billion years ago, life appeared. Much later, about 2.5 million years ago, creatures of the genus Homo emerged in Africa. Among them were several species: Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and others, each evolving traits of intelligence, cooperation, and tool use. Our own species, Homo sapiens, arrived about 200,000 years ago, but for tens of thousands of years it was just one among many, hardly destined to dominate the world. What made sapiens unique was not sheer strength, speed, or even individual cunning, but the capacity for collective imagination. Harari describes this as the cognitive revolution, which occurred roughly 70,000 years ago. Before this revolution, humans already had language, but it was mostly functional, limited to immediate concerns such as warnings about predators or coordination in hunts. Afterward, language evolved into something richer: the ability to gossip, to share stories, to imagine things that did not physically exist. It was gossip, surprisingly, that allowed groups to grow larger than the small bands familiar to chimpanzees or gorillas. Chimpanzee society collapses if more than about 50 individuals live together because they cannot maintain trust without constant personal interaction. But sapiens could bind 150 or more into a single tribe by weaving narratives about spirits, ancestors, tribal myths that gave strangers a reason to trust one another. The truly radical step was not just gossip but the leap into shared fictions. Harari emphasizes that myths, whether about tribal totems, gods, nations, or human rights, are inventions, yet they are the glue that binds large societies. Two people who have never met can cooperate effectively if they believe in the same story. A soldier and a general, for instance, are both bound by their faith in the nation they serve, even though the nation itself is not a physical object but a collective myth. Money is another such fiction. A dollar bill is a piece of paper, but billions of people act as though it has value because they collectively believe in it. Without such shared fictions, commerce, governance, and complex social organization would collapse. The first great transformation driven by this new cognitive ability was the migration of sapiens out of Africa. As they moved, they displaced or absorbed other human species. Harari presents the unsettling suggestion that our ancestors committed history's first large-scale genocide by outcompeting, and perhaps exterminating, other Homo species like the Neanderthals. Archaeological evidence shows that soon after sapiens arrived in a new region, the native megafauna disappeared. In Australia, giant marsupials and other massive animals vanished soon after humans arrived some 45,000 years ago. Similarly, when humans reached the Americas about 16,000 years ago, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats quickly went extinct. The pattern suggests that humans were a uniquely destructive force, a kind of ecological serial killer. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, their lives shaped by foraging. Harari stresses that this lifestyle was not as miserable as modern imagination paints it. Foragers often worked fewer hours than today's laborers, had varied diets richer in nutrients, and enjoyed social bonds within small communities. They knew their environment intimately, recognizing hundreds of plant species and animal behaviors. Their lives were not paradise. They faced injury, infant mortality, and predation, but they had balance with their ecosystem. Then came what Harari calls the biggest fraud in history: the agricultural revolution around 12,000 years ago. Humans shifted from foraging to farming, domesticating wheat, rice, and other crops, along with animals such as sheep and cattle. On the surface, agriculture appeared to be progress. More food meant more people. Yet Harari argues that it was a trap. Farming demanded back-breaking labor, longer work hours, and dependence on a narrow range of crops. Diets became less varied, leading to malnutrition. Living in close quarters with domesticated animals exposed humans to new diseases. Hierarchies emerged as surpluses allowed some to accumulate wealth while others remained peasants. From the standpoint of the average forager, life after agriculture became harder, not easier. Yet evolution favors reproduction, not happiness, and agriculture supported larger populations. Wheat, in Harari's metaphor, domesticated humans as much as humans domesticated wheat. We bent our lives around its needs, building homes, fences, irrigation, and labor to ensure its spread. Agriculture enabled the formation of permanent villages, and eventually cities and kingdoms. With larger populations came the need for systems of cooperation beyond family and tribe. Here, again, myths and imagined orders provided the framework. Religion, law, and culture justified hierarchies. Writing was invented first not to create great literature but to manage bureaucracy. The earliest written records are not epics or poetry but lists of debts, inventories of grain, and tallies of taxes. Writing allowed rulers to govern large territories by recording obligations and ensuring accountability. As human societies expanded, so did the scale of imagined orders. Harari highlights how empires, religions, and trade networks spread not by brute force alone but by offering compelling stories. The Roman Empire united diverse peoples through the idea of citizenship and Roman law. Christianity bound strangers together with the promise of salvation. Islam offered a universal religious identity that transcended tribe or ethnicity. Buddhism spread across Asia with its vision of liberation from suffering. These universal orders had an advantage. Unlike tribal myths that applied only to insiders, universal religions and empires welcomed outsiders, thus expanding cooperation across immense populations. Equally transformative was money, which Harari calls the most universal and tolerant system of mutual trust ever devised. Gold, silver, and eventually paper money created a universal medium of exchange. Two strangers could trade a cow for wheat not because they trusted each other but because they both trusted in the value of money. Money was more flexible than kinship, religion, or empire because it allowed cooperation even among people of different beliefs. Its neutrality, gold does not care whether one believes in Jesus or Shiva, made it the backbone of global trade. Alongside money and empire came another imagined order, the idea of universal human rights. Harari challenges us to see that concepts like equality and liberty are not natural facts but shared fictions, similar to gods and money. From a biological perspective, humans are not born with rights. These are concepts created by humans to govern behavior and institutions. Yet because enough people believe in them, they have real power. The pace of change accelerated with the scientific revolution, beginning around 500 years ago. Harari argues that science was revolutionary not merely for discovering new facts but for establishing a new attitude, the willingness to admit ignorance. Medieval thinkers assumed the Bible or ancient authorities contained all knowledge worth knowing. In contrast, early scientists like Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton began from the premise that they did not know and must experiment to find answers. This humility about ignorance was paradoxically the source of science's power. Science flourished in tandem with empires and capitalism. European expansion was not just about military conquest but about scientific exploration. Maps improved, botanical knowledge expanded, and technologies like the steam engine emerged. Science required funding and capitalism provided it. Banks, investors, and stock markets channeled resources into risky ventures of exploration and innovation, hoping for profits. The Dutch East India Company exemplified this fusion of science, capitalism, and empire, combining trade, naval power, and research. Capitalism itself, Harari stresses, is a system built on trust in the future. Credit and loans are only possible if people believe tomorrow will be more productive than today. In medieval times, charging interest was often condemned because people distrusted growth. Modern capitalism flourished when societies accepted the notion of progress. A banker will lend money to an entrepreneur not out of charity but because both expect the future will yield profits. This faith in future growth is one of the most powerful fictions of all, and it has driven economic expansion since the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution transformed economies, societies, and environments. Machines harnessed coal and later oil, multiplying human productivity. Factories produced goods at scales unimaginable in earlier times. Trains, ships, and telegraphs shrank the world. Populations exploded as agriculture became mechanized and medicine advanced. Harari notes how modern medicine exemplifies the shift. For thousands of years, doctors often did more harm than good, prescribing ineffective or harmful remedies. Only in the modern era, with the scientific method, did medicine begin reliably saving lives. Vaccinations, antibiotics, and public health initiatives dramatically extended life expectancy. But industrialization also brought costs. Families left rural villages for urban factories, severing traditional social bonds. Harari describes how time itself became industrialized. Workers had to follow the clock, not the rhythms of nature, as factory whistles replaced sunrise and sunset. Education systems were designed to produce punctual, obedient workers suited for industrial needs. Nationalism grew as states mobilized entire populations for wars fought with industrial weaponry. Meanwhile, the industrial economy produced consumer culture. For most of history, people consumed little beyond basic needs, but modern capitalism thrives on ever-growing consumption. Harari points out that much of what we buy is not strictly necessary for survival but fulfills imagined desires shaped by marketing. People work long hours to buy products that advertisers convince them are essential for happiness. The 20th century witnessed the rise of ideologies, liberalism, communism, nationalism, fascism, that function like religions, offering grand narratives to organize societies. Wars between these ideologies shaped global politics. Harari emphasizes that despite violence, the long arc of history shows a decline in relative violence compared to past eras. While the 20th century's world wars were horrific, statistically humans today are less likely to die by violence than in prehistoric or medieval times, when homicide and tribal warfare were common. This decline stems from states monopolizing violence, the spread of commerce that makes cooperation more profitable than conflict, and the influence of universal values like human rights. In recent decades, another revolution has begun: the biotechnology and information revolutions. Harari warns that humans are gaining powers once reserved for gods. We can manipulate DNA, clone organisms, design embryos, and even merge biology with technology. Artificial intelligence threatens to reshape labor, identity, and society. If intelligence can be decoupled from consciousness, if machines can make decisions without feelings, the very foundation of human dominance may be undermined. Throughout, Harari threads the question of happiness. Did all this progress make humans happier? Foragers may have lived shorter lives, but perhaps they had more meaningful connections and freedom. Farmers produced surpluses but endured toil and inequality. Industrial workers gained material comforts but often lived monotonous lives in alienating cities. Studies suggest that beyond a certain point, wealth does not significantly increase happiness. Humans are wired to adapt. Once basic needs are met, more wealth leads only to fleeting satisfaction before expectations reset. Harari also highlights that happiness is shaped not just by external conditions but by biochemical processes in the brain. Our feelings of joy, stress, or contentment are influenced by serotonin, dopamine, and other chemicals, meaning that political revolutions and economic growth may alter circumstances but not the underlying mechanisms of happiness. This realization leads to an unsettling reflection. The greatest revolutions of the future may not be in economics or politics but in re-engineering humans themselves. Genetic modification, brain-computer interfaces, and artificial life forms could redefine what it means to be human. Harari provocatively asks, if we could redesign ourselves to eliminate suffering, boost intelligence, or extend life indefinitely, should we? And if some can but others cannot, will new superhuman classes emerge, widening inequality to unbridgeable levels? In the end, Sapiens is not simply a history book but a meditation on the nature of humanity. Our species rose to global dominance not because we were the strongest or even the smartest individually, but because we alone can create and believe in shared fictions that organize millions of strangers into cooperative networks. Religion, money, empires, science, capitalism, and human rights are all stories we tell one another, stories that gain power because enough people accepted them. These stories can liberate or enslave, bring prosperity or destruction. The book closes with a profound ambiguity. We have more power than ever before, but we may not know what to do with it. For millennia, human goals were survival and reproduction, but now those are almost assured for much of humanity. We pursue pleasure, happiness, meaning, yet our sciences suggest these are just biochemical states subject to manipulation. So what should we want? What will we become? The story of Sapiens is unfinished, and the next chapters may be written not by natural evolution but by conscious design. Whether that design will bring fulfillment or alienation, unity or division, is a question left hanging, one that forces the reader to consider not just where we came from but where we are heading. And that's it. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.